Wow, I can't even believe we are at the start of a new year again. So I am here to talk about my new reading goals for 2025. If you've watched my videos before, you know that I don't set a goal like a lot of people do to read a certain number of books. I'm actually not a fast reader in the sense that I'm just like plowing through book after book every week. I know some people on BookTube read 100 or more books in a year, but I'd rather take my time, immerse myself in my reading, and also the most important thing to me is not how many books I read, but the breadth of what I read. So what I do every year is I set a goal or a list of goals for what categories I want to read in. And sometimes there are categories that I'm kind of working on that I keep moving from one year to the next, and then I always want to switch it up as well. So I have some kind of different ideas for this year that I'm going to talk about, but first let me tell you about the 4 categories that I'm bringing over from last year to work on some more, if you will, to read in again in 2025. So the first category I want to read in again in 2025 is a contemporary novel in translation. And these can be a little bit difficult to find. I talked about that in my wrap-up video for 2024. But one source that I found online when I was thinking about this that I'm going to share with you in the comment section below was actually an interview with the Booker Prize nominees from 2024. In which they asked them about their favorite novels in translation. So I'm really interested to kind of dig into that list and maybe pick something recommended off that list to read as my book or books in translation for 2025. There are also translation prizes, so that's a good way to go looking for books in translation. There are so many great novels that are published initially in another language that we don't have access to until and unless a translator gets their hands on it and translates it into English for us. Writers from different parts of the world tell stories differently. And so it can be really interesting to read books in translation because they're not told from an American perspective. Another category I'm bringing over from 2024 is part of my ongoing quest to find funny books. And I've talked about this before, so I won't belabor the point, but it's hard to find funny books. And if you search for humor, you get a lot of stuff that's not really laugh out loud funny. There are like books by comedians which tend to not be very good. They're marketed on somebody's fame, but they're not necessarily well written, most of them. Or you might get like books that are satire or tragic comedy, or maybe just have a wacky sensibility, but none of that is really the kind of thing that's going to make me laugh out loud, and that's what I'm looking for. So I talked in my 2024 video about a couple of books that made me laugh last year, which were surprising. I'm going to keep looking because there's just not enough humor out there, in my opinion, and I'm still on a quest. One category that I include every year is to read a classic novel that I haven't read before. And I never know what it's going to be, but inevitably something will cross my path during the year. It's all a mystery to me what it'll be, but I know that at some point I'll pick up a new classic, a classic that's new to me. And the 4th category that I'm going to bring over from 2024 is one that I put on the list for the first time last year. And that is, I didn't call it this last year, but I think the best way to explain it is to build an oeuvre, meaning to read more books by an author that I already know a little bit. For last year, I read a Thomas Hardy novel because I've read a couple of other Hardy novels and really enjoyed them. And I had a couple of other ideas about authors that I might pursue, but maybe in 2025 that list of ideas will change. I do like the idea of knowing an author really well, knowing their whole body of work, rather than just, picking a novel by this person and a novel by that person and never really immersing yourself in the work of one writer. So I really like that idea, and I'm going to pursue that again in 2025. Then I have 2 completely new ideas for driving my reading this coming year. And they're not categories like the other 4 I just mentioned. One of them is a project, and one of them is something that I just need to do. So let me talk about the project first. I really love the work of George Saunders. He's actually one of the writers I was thinking I might want to read more of, and I'm not sure that I can't really double dip here. So if I do this project, which involves George Saunders, I don't think I can also use it as building an oeuvre. So a couple of years ago, George Saunders published this book, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, and it's based on his teaching. I believe he teaches at Syracuse University. It says, for 20 years, George Saunders has been teaching a class on the Russian short story to his MFA students at Syracuse University. So this is based on those classes. It's kind of a master class. And by the way, I have a Substack newsletter, which I'll link to in the comment section below, but so does George Saunders. It's very popular, and he basically has like a reading club on Substack. So if you're interested in that, I'll also link to that. It costs a little bit of money to participate, but I think it's well worth it. So what I'm gonna do, my project, is to read, basically what he's doing here is he's going through a number of different Russian writers, Chekhov, Turgenev, Tolstoy, Gogol. He's talking about a particular story and then basically, teaching the class on it in this book. I'm not even gonna do all of the stories in this book, but I am gonna do the Chekhov story. So I picked up a while ago the selected stories of Anton Chekhov. So my idea is to do a project this coming year in which I read the Chekhov stories in here. Actually, I don't think the stories are reproduced in here. I'm going to read the Chekhov stories in here and then read what Saunders has to say about them in here. So this is my project for 2025. It's not a huge project because, as I said, it's not even the whole book, but it's something I've been meaning to read for quite a while, and I think I just need to set it as a goal so that I'll do it. The other thing that is different this year that I said a moment ago I need to do requires me to take you on a little tour of my bookshelves. So I have 3 areas where I have books sorted that I haven't read, basically 3 TBR piles. So I'm going to take you first to the nonfiction piles, and they're in 2 different places. One of them is here in my study, and the other one is next to my bed. And the difference between the 2 of them is that the one next to my bed is nonfiction that's appropriate for bedtime reading. It's not going to freak me out, give me nightmares. It's also not going to put me to sleep. It's going to be interesting enough to keep me reading for at least 20 minutes at bedtime. And then the nonfiction shelf in here that I haven't read yet is stuff that I'm not sure would play so well at bedtime. So let's take a look. So this is my shelf of nonfiction books that I haven't read yet that I think might not be so great for bedtime. So like here we have some essays by Marilynne Robinson. These are like the kinds of essays that probably need to be like read very closely and annotated. I just don't think I could read them at bedtime effectively. Dead Wake is about the sinking of the Lusitania. Like, I don't want to read about that right before I fall asleep. So it's not a huge collection, and there's some things here that you can't even see the titles of. I'm realizing that I don't usually come over here and pull stuff off this shelf when I'm looking for something to read. So it's here, but it's not acting like a resource. So my goal is to read at least 2 of the books on this shelf in 2025. I've got some great choices here, and they're just not going to be bedtime reading. I'm going to have to read them. Sometimes I read like over breakfast or just on a winter afternoon, and these are those kinds of books that need that sort of daytime attention. And then let me show you my other nonfiction pile is a little bit bigger. So these poor books are relegated to the floor next to my bed, and you can see I'm starting to have too many of them because they're getting piled up on top here. I just picked this one up not too long ago, Genesis, the story of how everything began. That looks really interesting to me. There's stuff up here on the top that, here's a Rebecca Solnit book, and some of them are really big, heavy books. This is a history of the city of Kingston, near where I grew up in the Hudson Valley. I take it as a sign when I've got them piling up on top here that maybe it's time to read some of them and get them out of this TBR pile. I'm guessing that if I went through this carefully, I could probably find a few books that I would even just move along and say, yeah, you know, I thought at one time I was going to read this, but I'm not so sure. Part of my goal is also to read at least 2 books from this collection as well. It doesn't have to be at bedtime, but these are books that I've kind of decided I think would be okay to read at bedtime. I don't even know what I'm going to find when I look through here, but you can tell, again, I'm not pulling things from here because they're just sort of tucked away here and I don't necessarily think about them. And also, as it probably happens with you, because you're big readers too, books are coming into the house all the time. So they just start to pile up after a while. So 2 books from this group as well. Okay, and now here's the really embarrassing one.
This pile is so big, it's ridiculous. So I might be okay with having a TBR pile that is 1 stack high, but it got so high that it was about to topple over, so now it's 2 stacks high. So that's not okay. Like, first of all, I probably have to go through this and pull out some books. But again, 2 books from this group for 2025, and every single book in here is a book I'm interested in reading. It's just that, oh, so many books, so little time. What to choose? So, and they keep cycling in and out. Sometimes I'll see one on the top and I'll be like, I'm not going to read that anytime soon, and I'll pull it out again. I just put Mansfield Park on the top here recently. I don't even remember. Somebody mentioned it and I was like, oh yeah, I really enjoyed that. I've read this before. But I thought, oh yeah, I really want to read that again. And then same thing, a friend mentioned Middlesex. I've had this book for I don't know how long and I've never read it. A friend was raving about it recently. You know, like, why haven't I read it yet? So that's in here. Same thing with The Road, Cormac McCarthy. I mean, it goes on and on. I picked this up in a used bookstore. So there's just so much great stuff here. You know, I could spend the whole winter working my way through this pile and not even get halfway through it. So this is the embarrassing pile, and I'm going to read 2 books from this pile at least in 2025, and also maybe try to cull it a little bit.
So that's my reading plan for 2025. As I said, I'm going to set it, I'm going to say it's what I'm going to do, and then I'm just going to go off and read. For about 9 months, I'm just going to read whatever I read. And I'll check in with this list later in 2025 and see how I'm doing and try to fill in the gaps. I'm going to keep in mind especially those 3 piles though, because I know that's going to be, it's going to be tempting to circumvent them and let them keep growing. So I'm really going to work on that, maybe first up. Along with getting started on Chekhov and George Saunders. I would love to hear what you're planning to read in 2025. What are some of your goals for the coming reading year? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like what you see here, please subscribe, and I'll be back soon with another episode of Better Book Clubs.